Why Dean Martin's hidden Mafia connections finally came to light. The Golden Years and Hidden Shadows. The year was 1950, and the world was falling in love with Dean Martin. His voice, a velvet caress, flowed effortlessly from radios and jukeboxes, a perfect counterpoint to the boisterous antics of his partner Jerry Lewis. Together, they were a phenomenon, a comedic and musical duo that redefined entertainment. Dean, with his perpetually half-closed eyes, a cigarette dangling from his lips, and a martini glass never far from reach, exuded an aura of effortless cool. He was the epitome of the suave, sophisticated crooner, a man who seemed to glide through life with an enviable nonchalance. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of Hollywood glamour and the dazzling lights of Las Vegas, a darker, more complex narrative was beginning to unfold, one that would inextricably link Dino Crocetti, the boy from Steubenville, Ohio, to the shadowy world of organized crime. Steubenville itself offered the first subtle clues. A gritty industrial town on the Ohio River, it was a known hub for illegal gambling, bootlegging, and various rackets during the Prohibition era and beyond. Dean's father, Gaetano Crocetti, was a barber, but young Dino, born in 1917, grew up in an environment where the lines between legitimate business and illicit enterprise were often blurred. He dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, working odd jobs, a steel mill laborer, a gas station attendant, a blackjack dealer, and even a boxer under the name Kid Crochet. It was in these early years, navigating the backrooms and smoky clubs of Steubenville, that he first encountered the men who operated outside the law. These were the local enforcers, the bookmakers, the club owners who often had silent partners with deeper, more dangerous connections. His foray into entertainment began in these very clubs, first as a singer, then as a charismatic presence. He learned to charm, to disarm, and to navigate the intricate social dynamics of a world where a friendly face could hide a ruthless ambition. By the mid-1940s, Dean Martin had moved to New York, honing his craft in supper clubs, where he caught the eye of talent scouts and, perhaps more importantly, the attention of individuals who saw potential in his unique blend of talent and charisma. When he teamed up with Jerry Lewis in 1946, their meteoric rise was unprecedented. They conquered vaudeville, radio, television, and Hollywood, churning out hit movies like My Friend Irma, 1949, and The Caddy. Their success was not just about talent, it was about timing and access. And in the post-war boom, as Las Vegas began its transformation from a dusty desert outpost into the glittering entertainment capital of the world, access often meant a nod from the right people. Las Vegas in the 1950s was a city built on dreams and financed by illicit cash. Figures like Meyer Lansky, the financial genius of the mob, and Bugsy Siegel, the visionary who built the Flamingo, had laid the groundwork. Though Siegel was assassinated in 1947, his legacy of mob-controlled casinos persisted. The Sands, the Desert Inn, the Sahara, these were not just hotels, they were money-laundering operations, cash cows for the Chicago outfit, the Genovese family, and other crime syndicates. They needed top-tier entertainment to draw in the crowds, to keep the money flowing, and to maintain their veneer of legitimacy. Enter Dean Martin. His easygoing persona, his ability to command a stage, and his undeniable star power made him a prime target for these establishments. He was a natural fit for the Vegas scene, a man who embodied the city's blend of glamour and grit. His performances at the Sands, particularly after his split from Jerry Lewis in 1956, cemented his status as a solo superstar. But these engagements were not merely contractual agreements between an artist and a venue. They were often facilitated, influenced, and overseen by men whose names were whispered in hushed tones, men who held immense power behind the scenes. The shadows began to lengthen, not just over Dean, but over the entire entertainment industry. The mob had long understood the power of celebrity, not just for drawing crowds, but for laundering their image, for gaining influence, and for creating a network of favors and obligations. Dean Martin, with his charm and his seemingly carefree attitude, was the perfect conduit. He was approachable, likable, and crucially, he understood the unspoken rules of the game. He knew how to keep his mouth shut, how to be a good sport, and how to enjoy the lavish perks without asking too many questions. This tacit understanding, this unspoken agreement, would become a defining characteristic of his relationship with the underworld, a relationship that would cast a long, complex shadow over his otherwise brilliant career. The golden years were indeed golden, but they were also gilded with the subtle yet undeniable influence of hidden hands. If you're intrigued by the hidden histories of Hollywood and the mob, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more untold stories. The late 1950s and early 1960s marked the zenith of Dean Martin's association with the Rat Pack, a legendary group of entertainers that included Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop. Their impromptu, boozy, and endlessly charismatic performances at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas became the stuff of legend. They were the kings of the Strip, drawing crowds, breaking box office records, and embodying an era of unparalleled cool. But behind the dazzling lights and the seemingly spontaneous camaraderie lay a meticulously orchestrated operation, one deeply intertwined with the machinations of organized crime. Frank Sinatra, the undeniable leader of the Rat Pack, was the primary conduit to the mob. His connections were extensive and well documented, stretching back to his early career in New Jersey and Chicago. Figures like Sam Giancana, the ruthless boss of the Chicago outfit, and Johnny Roselli, the mob's Hollywood fixer, were not just acquaintances, they were powerful allies and at times demanding masters. Sinatra, in turn, extended this network of influence and protection to his closest friends, including Dean Martin. For Martin, the Rat Pack offered more than just friendship and a stage, it offered a shield. Sinatra's mob ties meant that the Rat Pack operated with a certain impunity. They could demand exorbitant fees, receive preferential treatment, and enjoy a level of security that few other entertainers could command. When Dean Martin performed at the Sands, he wasn't just working for Jack Entratter, the casino's manager, he was, by extension, working for the Chicago outfit, whose silent partners controlled the establishment. The Sands, like many other Vegas casinos of the era, was a mob-run enterprise, a giant money-laundering machine where the profits flowed directly into the coffers of organized crime. The benefits for the mob were clear. The Rat Pack brought in high rollers, generated immense publicity, and provided a legitimate front for their illicit activities. The casinos thrived, and the mobsters reaped the rewards. For the Rat Pack members, the benefits were equally tangible: unparalleled fame, immense wealth, and a sense of invincibility. They were treated like royalty, their every whim catered to, their indiscretions often overlooked. Specific incidents and rumors abound from this period. It was widely known that Sam Giancana held a significant sway over Sinatra, and by extension the Rat Pack. Giancana would often visit the Sands, sitting at a reserved table, observing the performances, and occasionally summoning Sinatra for private conversations. Dean Martin, ever the observer, was undoubtedly aware of these interactions. While Sinatra was the one who often directly engaged with the mob bosses, Martin was a willing participant in the ecosystem they created. He enjoyed the lavish lifestyle, the high-stakes gambling, and the constant flow of women and liquor that came with being a Rat Pack member in a mob-controlled city. One of the most infamous examples of mob influence was the Calneva Lodge, a resort on Lake Tahoe that Sinatra purchased in 19... It quickly became a playground for the Rat Pack and a meeting place for mob figures like Giancana. The FBI, already keenly aware of Sinatra's associations, intensified their surveillance. The presence of Giancana at Calneva, often with Marilyn Monroe, became a major headache for Sinatra, eventually leading to the Nevada Gaming Control Board revoking his casino license in 1963, forcing him to sell his stake. Dean Martin, though not directly implicated in the Calneva scandal, was a frequent guest and performer there, further solidifying his association with the mob's inner circle. These connections weren't just about business, they were about a way of life. The mob offered a certain kind of protection, a sense of belonging to an exclusive club. For Dean Martin, who had grown up in a tough town and learned to navigate its underbelly, this world was not entirely alien. He understood the unspoken codes, the importance of loyalty, and the dangers of crossing the wrong people. He was a man who preferred to avoid conflict, to keep things light, but he was also shrewd enough to understand the power dynamics at play. He knew that his success, particularly in Las Vegas, was in part facilitated by these dark alliances. The Rat Pack's dark secrets were not just Sinatra's, they were shared, implicitly or explicitly, by all who basked in its dangerous glow. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the hidden side of Hollywood, hit the like button to show your support. As the Rat Pack's star burned brightest, so too did the scrutiny from an increasingly concerned federal government. J. Edgar Hoover, the long-serving and notoriously powerful director of the FBI, harbored a deep-seated obsession with organized crime. He viewed the mob as a pervasive threat to American society, and their infiltration of legitimate businesses, particularly the burgeoning entertainment industry in Las Vegas and Hollywood, was a major target. The FBI's files on Frank Sinatra alone ran into thousands of pages, and by extension, Dean Martin found himself a recurring figure in these extensive investigations. The FBI's surveillance operations were relentless. Wiretaps, informants, undercover agents, and meticulous record-keeping were all deployed to track the movements and associations of key mob figures. When Sam Giancana, Johnny Roselli, and other outfit bosses frequented Las Vegas casinos or the Calneva Lodge, their interactions with celebrities like Sinatra and Martin were meticulously documented. The FBI wasn't just interested in the mobsters, they wanted to understand the full extent of their influence and how they leveraged their connections with public figures. Dean Martin's name appeared in numerous FBI reports, often in the context of his association with Sinatra and other known mob associates. While he was never the primary target of an investigation, his presence at mob-controlled establishments, his performances for mob-connected audiences, and his friendships with individuals under surveillance placed him squarely within the FBI's purview. Reports detailed his attendance at parties where mob figures were present, his gambling habits in casinos linked to the outfit, and even casual conversations overheard through wiretaps that hinted at the unspoken understanding between the entertainers and their underworld benefactors. One particular area of FBI interest was the financial arrangements between the casinos and the performers. While contracts were ostensibly legitimate, the FBI suspected that mob figures often received kickbacks, skimmed profits, or used the celebrities to launder money or exert influence. Dean Martin, with his immense earning power, was a valuable asset in this ecosystem. Though there was no direct evidence of Martin personally engaging in illicit financial transactions, his willingness to perform in mob-owned venues and accept the lavish perks that came with it was enough to raise red flags for federal agents. The FBI also paid close attention to the political implications of these connections. Frank Sinatra, in particular, was a vocal supporter of John F. Kennedy, and his mob ties became a significant embarrassment for the Kennedy administration, which was simultaneously launching a major crackdown on organized crime through Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Dean Martin, while less overtly political than Sinatra, was part of this inner circle, and his presence lent an air of legitimacy to the mob-connected events and individuals. The pressure from the FBI was immense, even if often indirect. The constant surveillance, the knowledge that every move was being watched, every conversation potentially recorded, created an atmosphere of paranoia and distrust. While Dean Martin maintained his cool exterior, the underlying tension must have been palpable. The FBI's goal was not necessarily to arrest the celebrities, but to expose the mob's influence, to disrupt their operations, and to make it increasingly difficult for them to operate in the open. The declassified FBI files, many of which became publicly available decades later, paint a vivid picture of this era. They reveal the extent of the mob's reach, the meticulousness of the FBI's investigations, and the uncomfortable proximity of Hollywood's biggest stars to some of the nation's most dangerous criminals. Dean Martin, the charming crooner, was not just an entertainer, he was a figure caught in the crosshairs of a monumental struggle between law enforcement and organized crime, a struggle that would ultimately reshape the landscape of Las Vegas and Hollywood forever. His presence in these files serves as a stark reminder that even the most seemingly carefree lives can be touched by the hidden hand of power. What are your thoughts on the FBI's surveillance of celebrities during this era? Share your comments below. The early to mid-1960s marked a significant turning point for both organized crime in America and the celebrities who had long benefited from its patronage. The seemingly impenetrable fortress of mob control over Las Vegas began to show cracks, and the comfortable arrangement that Dean Martin and the Rat Pack had enjoyed started to unravel. Several factors contributed to this shift, pushing the hidden connections into a more precarious and eventually public light. Firstly, the Kennedy administration's aggressive stance against organized crime, spearheaded by Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, sent shockwaves through the underworld. RFK's relentless pursuit of mob figures like Sam Giancana and Jimmy Hoffa made it increasingly difficult for them to operate with their previous impunity. The pressure on their legitimate fronts, including the casinos, intensified. The FBI, emboldened by political will, ramped up its efforts, making it riskier for mob bosses to openly associate with high-profile celebrities. Secondly, the Nevada Gaming Control Board, under increasing federal pressure, began to tighten its regulations. The revocation of Frank Sinatra's gaming license at the Cal Neva Lodge in 1963 was a seismic event. It was a clear message that the old ways of doing business were no longer acceptable. Sinatra, who had defiantly hosted Giancana at the lodge, was forced to sell his stake, a humiliating blow that signaled the beginning of the end for the mob's overt control of the casinos. This event directly impacted Dean Martin, as it meant one less mob-friendly venue where he could perform and socialize without intense scrutiny. The changing ownership of Las Vegas casinos also played a crucial role. Corporate interests, often backed by legitimate financing, began to acquire properties that had long been under mob control. Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire, famously bought the Sands Hotel in 1967, among other properties. This corporate takeover aimed to clean up the image of Las Vegas, making it more palatable for mainstream tourism and investment. For entertainers like Dean Martin, this meant a shift in power dynamics. The personal relationships and unspoken favors that had characterized their dealings with mob-controlled venues were replaced by more formal, corporate contracts. The friends in the back room were being replaced by accountants and lawyers. Dean Martin, ever the pragmatist, began to subtly distance himself from the more overt aspects of the Rat Pack's mob connections. While he remained loyal to Sinatra, the public display of their camaraderie with known mobsters became less frequent. His career was evolving. He had a successful television show, The Dean Martin Show, which premiered in 1965,
and a string of hit records. He was no longer solely reliant on the Las Vegas circuit or the mob's protection. His brand of easygoing charm was universally appealing, and he could thrive without the shadow of the underworld. There were also personal factors at play. The Rat Pack itself began to fracture. Peter Lawford's estrangement from Sinatra after the Kennedy assassination and Sammy Davis Jr.'s increasing solo success meant the group's unified front was weakening. Dean Martin, always a man who valued his privacy and his family, may have grown weary of the constant scrutiny and the inherent dangers of his associations. While he never publicly denounced his friends or their connections, his actions suggested a gradual, strategic withdrawal from the most perilous aspects of the mob's orbit. The breaking point wasn't a single dramatic event for Dean Martin, but rather a confluence of external pressures and internal shifts. The mob's grip was loosening, the government's gaze was intensifying, and the entertainment industry was professionalizing. The era of the celebrity-mob symbiosis was drawing to a close. For Dean Martin, it meant navigating a new landscape, one where the hidden shadows were slowly, but surely, being illuminated by the harsh light of public and governmental scrutiny. He adapted, as he always had, but the indelible marks of his past associations would forever remain, waiting for the opportune moment to fully emerge. Chapter 5. The Truth Emerges. The full extent of Dean Martin's hidden Mafia connections did not burst forth in a single dramatic revelation during his lifetime. Instead, the truth emerged gradually, a mosaic pieced together over decades through declassified government documents, investigative journalism, tell-all biographies, and the memoirs of former mob associates. It was a slow, undeniable unveiling that ultimately solidified his place in the complex tapestry of Hollywood and organized crime history. After the decline of the Rat Pack's mob-influenced heyday in the 1960s, Dean Martin continued his incredibly successful career. His television show was a massive hit, his records sold millions, and he transitioned seamlessly into a beloved elder statesman of entertainment. He maintained his public persona of the carefree martini-swilling crooner, a man seemingly untouched by scandal or controversy. Yet the whispers persisted, and the paper trail left by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies began to surface. In the 1970s and 80s, as the Freedom of Information Act allowed for the declassification of more government documents, the FBI files on figures like Frank Sinatra, Sam Giancana, and Johnny Roselli became accessible to researchers and journalists. Within these thousands of pages, Dean Martin's name appeared repeatedly. These documents detailed his presence at mob-controlled casinos, his associations with known organized crime figures, and the FBI's suspicions about the nature of these relationships. While the files never directly implicated Martin in criminal activities, they unequivocally established his close proximity and tacit involvement in the mob's ecosystem. Biographies of Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and other Rat Pack members, often published years after their peak fame, or even posthumously, delve deeper into these connections. Authors like Kitty Kelly, His Way, the unauthorized biography of Frank Sinatra, and Nick Tosh's Dino, Living High in the Dirty Business of Dreams, meticulously researched and documented the intricate web of relationships. They drew upon interviews with former associates, law enforcement officials, and even mob figures themselves, painting a comprehensive picture of how organized crime influenced the careers and lives of these iconic entertainers. The memoirs of mobsters, such as those by Giancana's relatives or former associates, also shed light on the dynamics. They often spoke of Sinatra and Martin with a mixture of respect and proprietary ownership, viewing them as assets who understood the rules and benefited from the mob's protection and patronage. These accounts, while sometimes self-serving, corroborated many of the details found in the FBI files, adding a human, albeit chilling, dimension to the official records. The impact of these revelations on Dean Martin's legacy is complex. For many fans, his charm and talent remained undiminished. They viewed his associations as a necessary evil of the era, a byproduct of working in a mob-controlled industry. For others, the knowledge of his connections added a layer of intrigue, a darker edge to his otherwise smooth persona. It explained the source of some of his immense power and influence, and perhaps, the unspoken understanding in his perpetually half-closed eyes. Dean Martin himself never publicly addressed these connections in detail. He maintained his characteristic silence on controversial topics, preferring to let his work speak for itself. This silence, however, only fueled the speculation and allowed the narrative to be shaped by external sources. He was a man who understood the power of mystique, and perhaps, the wisdom of not confirming or denying what was already widely believed. Ultimately, the truth about Dean Martin's hidden Mafia connections came to light, not through a single exposé, but through the slow, steady accumulation of evidence. It revealed a man who, while never a made man or a criminal in the traditional sense, was undeniably a product of his environment and a beneficiary of a system deeply intertwined with organized crime. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the pervasive influence of the mob in mid-20th century America and how even the brightest stars of Hollywood and Las Vegas could find themselves dancing in the shadows, their golden careers forever linked to the darker side of the American dream. The carefree crooner from Steubenville, Ohio, carried more secrets than his easy smile ever let on, and it is in these unearthed truths that his legend truly finds its most compelling and perhaps most unsettling dimension. If you found this deep dive into Dean Martin's hidden history fascinating, please subscribe to our channel for more untold stories and share this video with anyone who loves celebrity history and true crime. Author's note: this story is a dramatized narrative based on extensive historical research, including declassified FBI files, numerous biographies of Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, and accounts from various sources on organized crime in the mid-20th century. While Dean Martin was never charged with any crimes related to the Mafia, his close associations with known organized crime figures, particularly through his work in Las Vegas and his relationship with Frank Sinatra, are well documented. This narrative aims to explore the context, implications, and eventual revelations of these connections, blending factual accuracy with a compelling storytelling approach suitable for an investigative journalism tone. The events and figures mentioned are real, and their interactions are depicted based on available historical evidence and scholarly interpretations.